Okay, so we've got another round of notes for this week. We are going to do the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. I am going to walk you through how to cut and paste this. So we'll start with the Boston Tea Party, and I'm going to cut the two sets of notes away from each other, like so. Alright, I want to cut out the title up for Boston Tea Party. Boom, and boom. Alright, there's going to be my title. Then I want to cut out this section right here as one piece. I think it'd be too difficult to try to cut that arrow out on its own. Just going to trim it up a little bit here so it doesn't look too bad. And I'll glue this down, like I said, as one piece. And finally, I'm going to cut out the cause and effect bubbles. They need to be separated. I am not the best cutter in the world. That is for sure. Okay. Okay, so let's glue this down. Let's glue the title, Boston Tea Party. Let's glue the bottom. And then I'm going to fill this in, and I'll put the cause tab over the cause and the effect tab over the effect. So we already have talked about what cause and effect is. We know that when one thing leads to another, the cause results in the effect. The effect happens because of the cause. Alright, this is mad crooked, but it's okay. Alright, so Parliament repealed the Townshend Acts. So that was from last week. We learned about what those were, and they came after the Stamp Act. But after they repealed it, they added on a new tax on tea called the Tea Act. Remember, act is a fancy word for law. This caused, that's why we have an arrow here, because this happened. Boston residents refused to allow British ships to unload. The Sons of Liberty then dumped the tea into the Boston harbor. So, because of the tax on tea, the Boston residents would not allow the ships to be unloaded. The tea could not come off the ships. Then the Sons of Liberty went onto the ships and took the tea and dumped them into the Boston harbor. And that's called the Boston Tea Party. Alright, now I'm going to glue. My glue is getting very worn. I'm going to glue my cause down. Make sure I grab my cause tab. Just put the glue right above the words there. And so I'll be able to lift up and read my cause. And the same for effect. Dab of glue. Effect flap. And I can lift up my effect flap and see what led to what here. Alright, let's move on to the Boston Massacre. Staying with Boston here. Remember, Boston was, still is a city in Massachusetts. Alright, so this is pretty straightforward. We're familiar with these. I'm going to cut out the large rectangle. Alright, and then I'm going to cut these little flaps into 3 sections. Do my little dab of glue. Put the title tab right over the dab of glue. And now I'll be able to write underneath. I need to remember this week coming up not to give anybody black construction paper, because that's going to be quite difficult for me to make out and grade if I do that. Alright, for the Boston Massacre. Number 1, what did British leaders do to Boston? Why? Alright, lift it up. I should have cut that a little better. Alright, British leaders sent troops because they felt the colonists were getting out of control, because the colonists were being rebellious, right? They didn't like the Stamp Act, they didn't like the Townshend Acts, they didn't like the tea tax, and they protested and acted out with each of those acts, and the British felt that this was getting out of control. So they felt the colonists were out of control. Especially Boston. That's where the tea was dumped, right? In the Boston Harbor. So now troops have shown up in Boston. I don't think that's going to make the situation better. Let's see. How did the Boston colonists react to the troops coming in? Now react, remember, that's an action they're going to take an action. Well, their feelings were, of course, the colonists were upset. Angry. Let's put angry. And here's the action. Some colonists were forced to house soldiers. Remember, we read something not too long ago about the Quartering Act, where people had to take in soldiers, whether they wanted to or not, and the soldiers were allowed to use the house as they please. So it'd be like someone coming to your house and being allowed to just come in and make themselves at home, use your things, eat your food. Alright, this led to what happened on March 5th, 1770. Incidentally, we're right around this date right now. March 7th and 8th are when you're going to be doing these notes. Alright, angry colonists teased British soldiers who were on duty. So those troops that were sent over here and were on duty trying to keep these colonists under control were being teased by the colonists. And this was, of course, again on March 5th, 1770. The crowd grew larger and refused to leave. Okay, and ultimately, soldiers shot into the crowd, hence why it's called the Boston Massacre. People were killed. All right, and the total number of people who were killed in the Boston Massacre as a result of these events was 5. Oof, those aren't covered so well. Alright, that's it for this video. Make sure your name is on it. I don't want to play guess the student. Put those in the basket. And let me come up with my question. In this video and previous videos, I have told you what an act is. Let's see if I can find it in here. When I mentioned act, it's a fancy word for what? And I want you to write it on the back of this construction paper in the bottom right-hand corner. Bottom right-hand corner, what act means. All right, make sure your name's on it in the basket.